Hi VC, another fat bearded man talking about records. This is going to be my response to Fred Big Star 1000's Gimme 10 1988, the penultimate one that's going to be done, I think. It's been a blast. I did think I wasn't going to be doing an 89, but I probably will. So I'll say my goodbyes and all thanks and all that stuff until then. So, right, 10 albums from 1988 that I really love. That's the thing. They're not the best albums. Well, they're my favourite albums. That's always been the case. 2 albums that I don't have on vinyl, but probably would be there. Public Enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Yeah. Good old Chuck D. If you haven't read any of his books, pick them up. They're really good. And the other one, and I'm showing this because I'm a huge fan of Leonard Cohen, and I was very sad when he died. And so to have done these Gimme 10s without showing a Leonard Cohen album would be somewhat a miss of me. And this was an amazing album. You know, a return to form. I didn't like some of the other stuff he did in the, I suppose, the late 70s, early 80s. But this is a perfect... I'll even forgive him for Jazz Police, which is, let's face it, the weakest link on this album. But yeah, if you haven't heard it, go and get it. It's good. Right, my top 10 then, which would have included those. First of all, I'll start with the ones that other people have shown. So we've got Spirit of Eden, Talk. Yeah, can't say anything really that other people haven't said. Beautiful album. It's my favourite album by Talk. What's the album afterwards? Laughing Stock. Yeah, they try to do the same sort of thing, but it doesn't kind of work. Mark Hollis's solo album he did more recently. It's probably about 15 years ago now, but that's worth picking up. The story I like about this was that EMI, after the strength of their last album, EMI gave them the space to do kind of what they wanted, and so they beavered away in the studio working on this, and then they had a kind of a playing for the studio execs and people. And supposedly there was an A&R man that just broke down in tears when he heard this. And no one's quite sure if it was because of how beautiful this album was, or whether he realised there were no singles on this album and he had to try and market a desperately unmarketable album. Anyway, it's gone down as a classic. Either way. If I Should Fall from Grace with God, the Pogues. Yeah, this is produced by Steve Lillywhite. It's not as raggle-taggle and it's still fun, but sort of, you know, that kind of punky aesthetic that they had earlier on. But, you know, it did allow them to, I suppose, create a record. And the production on something like Fairy Tale of New York, well, there we go. The soundtrack of many a Christmas. Of course, during the I say of course, during the recording of Fairy Tale of New York in the studio, the same sessions actually they did Rainy Night in Soho, and I always think it's a real shame that was released on an EP prior to this album, because with that album on, well, with that song on this, it would have been an absolute corker. R.E.M. Green. This was, I was at college when this came out, and we used to go out clubbing, and this was very much the what was being played in the indie discos, and so this was actually really my first introduction to R.E.M. So for that real reason, it gave me my love of R.E.M. It is a transitional album I think Fred mentioned on a previous album when he was talking about Document, he was talking about this, that actually it sort of straddles it has elements of the sort of IRS years and sort of other sort of parts that would be what they would do for Warner's for the next couple of records. And yeah, it's great. I really love it. I've never really understood quite. I don't know if anyone out there can tell me this. Bearing in mind I'm a big REM fan, and I've never understood. Now, can you see that bit in the middle there where it says 4? And they also have. I'm not sure if you can see. I probably can't. Let me see. Can I take it out of that? On the R of that one and on the one in green, there is a kind of a translucent 4. And I've never worked out what that was all about. Anyone out there, if you can tell me, I'd love to know. So yeah, World Leader Pretend. What can you say? Okay, some stuff that no one else has shown as of yet. Irish Heartbeat, Van Morrison and the Chieftains. Yeah, just a coming together of talents to create a kind of a perfect, almost a kind of a quintessential Irish country music, Irish folk music album. It's got all the great songs on it. I'll Tell Me Ma, Carrickfergus, Raglan Road, She Moved Through the Fair, and it's got an original Irish Heartbeat, which he released on a previous album, but it had lots of synthesizers and stuff, and it sounds marvellous on this. He sounds. He sounds perfect for these. It's like he's embracing the folk of his heritage that he'd up until this point kind of ignored and avoided. And I think something about that energy of him finally kind of coming to terms with that Irish folk heritage. I might be wrong, but that's what it sort of seems like to me. Okay, Prince with Love Sexy. I love this album again, much like the REM album. This was the album by Prince that he first kind of came onto my radar. Really, I was only about 15, 16 when this came out. I was growing up in North Yorkshire, you know. It's a long way from the cities, yeah, I love the album cover. It's so provocative. It's like that kind of he's become a kind of I was going to say kind of almost like a hermaphrodite, but there's that thing that this was released after Sign of the Times, and they'd just stopped the release of the Black Album, and so some of the stuff from the Black Album kind of filtered through into this. So you have that idea of Camille, kind of the female version of Prince, and there's elements of that on here as well. But you've got Alphabet Street, which is probably my favourite, apart from Sign of the Times. It's probably my favourite. It's the funkiest. This is a funky, jazzy album that sort of runs all together. In fact, the CD of it, some of the early CDs, it was all just one track. Grand Slam. I think probably the last great album he did. I know a lot of people kind of went off him before this, but for me, I love it. So go tell your mum about that. Okay, Los Lobos with let's get this right. La Pistola y el Corazón. Was that the Pistol and the Heart? And this is probably my favourite album by Los Lobos. It's kind of a mini album, really. There's 9 tracks on it, but they seem to release lots of mini albums. Bands don't seem to release mini albums these days. That's my phone. Yes, I have an ancient phone. I'm not up with the times. That's why I'm doing this on a camera rather than a smartphone. Anyway, I'll get that later. It won't be important. It'll only be Louise. So, I don't mean that. So this is an album. Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, bands don't tend to do mini albums. Mini albums were a thing of the 80s, it seems. Yeah, Los Lobos did a few of them. I showed one a number of years ago on these. I say years ago, you know what I mean. But this one, I'm rambling now. But this one is a collection of norteño music, which is kind of traditional Mexican with accordion, acoustic instruments. And when I listened prior to hearing this album, when I used to listen to Los Lobos albums, I always liked the more traditional stuff. I mean, you know, I liked the kind of rootsy rock stuff, but it was that traditional Mexican norteño music that I really liked. And this album is just all of that. None of the roots rock, so if you don't like that, well, if you like that, don't get it. But if you want a little bit of traditional Mexican music, it is a great album. Okay, I haven't had any country. I'm going to put some country in. Steve Earle, Copperhead Road. This is his biggest, stompiest, loudest, crash bang wallop of an album. I mean, it's got Copperhead Road on it, obviously, Devil's Right Hand, Johnny Come Lately, which has got the Pogues on it, I think it's Johnny Come Lately. So it's roots rock, country roots rock at its best. He would do better stuff later on, but this is, in 1988, you know, the country Springsteen, and yeah, love it. Now, I haven't had an opportunity to show this band. I'm a big fan of The Wedding Present, a band from Leeds in the UK, which is where I live. And although I will be doing a 1989, I haven't got their album Bizarro on vinyl, so I won't be showing that. And I didn't do one for 87, so I didn't get to show George Best. So this came along in 88, and it's called Tommy. And it is 1985 to 87 singles, EPs, radio sessions for Peel and Andy Kershaw. And yeah, it's quintessential British indie, chiming guitars, fast chiming guitars, and it's got one of my favourite songs of theirs on it, My Favourite Dress. Now, when I was at school, the indie kids, and I was one of them to some extent, although I did have a bit of a folk bent as well, the indie kids were kind of sectarian, and it was the division was drawn between those who liked that mopey Morrissey with his pretentious pile of nonsense, although of course the guitar work of Johnny Marr is pretty good, or the other ones who dug Dave Gedge and the Wedders, who were geniuses. And I was in the latter camp. Hate the Smiths, love the Wedders. Yeah. I know people like the Smiths. No, they have some good songs, but I don't like them. I don't care. Morris is an arse. Yeah, big Brexiteer. It's not surprising. Rubbing himself in the Union Jack. Hate the man. Right. Penultimate one here. We've got the Penguin Cafe Orchestra. This is a live album when in Rome. I think I have seen a Penguin Cafe Orchestra album shown. Can't remember who it was. But they are a kind of a modern classical chamber pop almost kind of group. This is a live album that's got all of the good stuff on it, like Music for the Found Harmonium, Yodel one, some of the stuff off their best other albums. Sadly, Simon Jeffs, or Jeffers, who was the brains behind them, died tragically young. Otherwise, we would have had other great records from him. So there we go. Right, final album. This is an album called Sungai. and this is a collaboration between, let's see, I can see it on the front there, Ketema, who are a Spanish kind of progressive flamenco band, Tumani Diabate, who is a Mali kora player, and the great bassist Danny Thompson, who we all know and love. And it's a wonderful collaboration between the three of them. Obviously other artists as well, and other musicians as well. But yeah, it's laid back world music. So you get the kind of flamenco guitar, you get the beautiful sound of the kora, and all kind of wrapped up with a jazzy bass from Danny Thompson. There is a second volume of this that was produced. I don't think that was produced on vinyl. But yeah, if you haven't heard it, seek it out. It's really nice, on the Hannibal label, that were a big producer of kind of world music. There we go. That's your 10, if we don't include the 2 CDs at the beginning. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be back probably with the 1989 to see a kind of big send-off. So hopefully you've been watching. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.